So much of the body's consciousness pertains to survival, in obtaining shelter, fuel for sustenance, and sexual expression for propagation of one's species. The bodily consciousness is a benevolent facet in creation. It ensures that an individual will not become so preoccupied with the ethereal that they will neglect the sustaining of their own needs for physical maintenance. Nevertheless, the bodily consciousness is in a persistent state of need. Its sustenance is cyclical in demand. It requires energy from food to be converted to regrowth of cellular structure on a daily cyclical basis. It requires security so that the spiritually dynamic individual can focus on higher pursuits. Yet, the bodily consciousness of man can grow to dominate the governance of an individual's consciousness. When the ego begins to control an individual's abstract cognitive faculties, this begins gradually, the development of an individual's abstract cognitive abilities begin gradually at age 4 to 5 and begin to expand further at age 9 and 10, hitting a major jump in puberty, age 12, 13, and 14, and then advancing a great deal between the ages of 19 and 22. These abstract cognitive faculties are a byproduct of an enhanced dimensionality of spirit within an individual that is reflected in cognitive advances in cellular structure, in aspects of an individual's brain tissue and capacity. The crux of this development is to enhance the individual with a greater capacity to commune with the abstract, with the ethereal, with the energy that is vibrating within all things, the energy that the spiritualist maintains has consciousness. The bodily consciousness of man is of an evolutionary program. It is designed to ensure that the species continues. It procreates. It searches for sustenance. It runs from threat or struggles and overcomes that threat. that programming is of a benevolent nature from a macro perspective for the gradual evolution of a species. Nevertheless, the bodily consciousness of an individual is not intended to take control of an individual's abstract cognitive capacities. For if an individual allows their ego to offer access for the bodily consciousness to take control of their abstract cognitive capacities and spirit, then the cycle of destruction and struggle and learning from without is firmly placed and set a course for the individual's progression. An individual can always break the binds of this, but understand that when the body consciousness of an individual takes control of the abstract cognitive capacities through the opening of that access by the ego, every situation becomes a fight or flight scenario. Every situation becomes imprinted through the narrative of a threat to my very existence, a threat to my very expression. And individuals will fight and challenge and struggle, or will separate themselves from natural harmonic progression in an act of flight. This individual will, instead of recognize the energies of sexuality to exude creativity and energy and zest for renewal and vigor and strength, this individual will now become obsessed with sexual expression to the detriment of all their other faculties. If the bodily consciousness gets control of an individual's abstract cognitive faculties, the bodily consciousness will continue to create narratives of urgency, with everything being a presentation of an urgent threat to the very essence of the individual's existence. And an individual begins to inhabit a very Machiavellian trajectory whereby everything in its path is a threat to its very existence, an object to be maneuvered, leveraged into a part of one's dominion, so that an individual will have the safety that the bodily consciousness yearns for. The bodily consciousness is not a serially wicked or bad energy. It is simply an energy that is designed for lower maintenance of the bodily form. Nevertheless, when the ego gives access to the bodily consciousness to the tier of abstract cognitive faculties of spirit, then the ego begins to create narratives to make itself relevant in that tier. And so the abstract cognitive faculties render narratives that are of threat to the individual when there is truly no threat other than the individual's out of balance approach and lack of harmony with its environment and surroundings. Most situations of imbalance where it is not of a chemical nature are a byproduct of an individual allowing their bodily consciousness to channel into their advanced cognitive abstract perception and render narratives that would create urgent emergencies that are of threat, do or die, consequence for the individual's progression, and help feed the ego and support the ego into a space of me versus the world, dominion, fiefdom, and oppression. We'll give the following analogy. Think of, for a moment, the idea of a corporation. In a corporation, you have a CEO who is in charge of all the various capacities and extensions of the company's pursuit for growth, interconnectivity with its field and environment, and maintenance of the relationships of that which it is in ready, continuous exchange. Think for a moment if an individual who was a manager of customer service would suddenly be elevated to the boardroom. They would not be thinking of the company's long-term progressions for profit. They would not be concerned with development of new research and technology. They would not be concerned with adjusting to the evolving landscape of business. They would simply be involved with the latest emergency that was brought to the customer service department for a particular product. And so if this individual be managing the company would suddenly become fixated with every issue being an issue of urgency for repair and fixing and challenging. And in a short time, the company would become discombobulated, not productive, and would reach dissolution. Therefore, the goal is not to sublimate the bodily consciousness, not to characterize it as tainted or bad, but simply award it its natural role in sustaining the bodily form of the human experience. The goal is to invert the ego from a space of service to self into a space of service to all. And in that space, the abstract cognitive faculties will be free to engage in their naturally intended role of relating to the abstract, of communing with the abstract, of giving and receiving with the vibrant energies of resonance, of consciousness, towards a benevolent progression for all.